Amtrak snafu. The Northeast Corridor is one of the busiest train lines in the United States. And Amtrak does a good job with the passengers going from city to city. Conrail does a good job too by carrying freight cars from place to place for its haulage. But one day, there was a glitch. James was arriving at St. Nicholas Station. He had pipes and building supplies for the construction builders. Toby had bad news. I'm afraid Thomas and Percy have tested positive with COVID, he said. So they're not going to be really useful. Don't worry, said James. I'm sure they'll be fine. Toby. A few minutes later, James arrived in the shunting yard. Dwee was pulling Annie and Clarabelle in Percy's mail cars. Thomas and Percy have taken ill. Toby said that at the station, said James. So it's time for you to do their jobs, Dwee. James smiled. Donald and Douglas were on their way to the shunting yard with a train with hazardous materials. They arrived just in time. I'm sure these poisonous cars will do good, said Donald. They will, said Douglas. And Donald and Douglas puffed away. James was feeling pleased with himself. So he buffered his freight cars up to the American cars, and he puffed away. That looks like a really long train, said Annie. It does, said Clarabelle. Make sure to go slowly and carefully, said Dwee, 'cause that's a long train. James steamed off into the beautiful countryside with his long train of hazardous materials. It was a long train. "94 cars coming through," said James, "'cause I must do my job." Just then, one of the troublesome trucks had an idea. "Let's play a trick on James and push him on down the hill like a roller coaster." "That's a good idea," said the other. Then there was trouble. James was beginning to go really fast. "The cars are too heavy," cried James. "I must stop." Then he was very scared because he didn't know how to stop the cars. He sped around the curve like a slithering snake. Henry was letting off passengers at Maithwaite when James sped by. "Slow down, James," wheezed Henry. "That's way too long for a train." James was going really fast that his brakes were malfunctioning. "My emergency brakes might work," James thought to himself. But I'm sure I'll make it on time. Then James... I can't stop! Yelled James. My train is too heavy! James applied his emergency brakes. But there was no time to prevent a collision. Fire began to explode, and flames began to get giant all around the town. And everything began to shake. Help! Cried the passengers. This is an emergency! Toby was horrified. Luckily, no one was hurt. But James had crashed right into the Amtrak coach, and he telescoped 8 feet into it. My red coat is ruined, moaned James. That looks horrifying, said Toby. I'm sure this station will be cleaned up soon. Sir Topham Hatt wasn't sure. Not soon enough, Toby, said Sir Topham Hatt. Maybe until Christmas. Before long, the wreck was cleaned up and the station was reopened. And all the engines were being really useful again. Treva arrived in the yard. I'm here to collect my train. I'm glad to be really useful again, said James. Thomas and Percy were all better. Thomas and Percy might have to wear masks to be safe, said Treva. James laughed. No, Treva, they don't, said Toby. Engines don't wear masks, said Thomas. Well, Sir Topham Hatt wore a mask in the grocery store the other day to be safe, said Percy. Treva buffered up to the freight cars. I must go, said Treva. Thomas, Percy, and James and Toby watched as the whole goods trains took off. Good luck, they all called at the same time. And Treva puffed away. The train was really long. But the engines carried on. Meanwhile, the Amtrak Maple Leaf was making its way towards Toronto, Ontario, which is a province west of Boston. Then there was trouble. A coupler broke, and the Amfleet cars rolled away. Whee! Cheered the passengers. And the train went really fast indeed. Treva was making her way. I must make it on time, she said. Then there was trouble. Treva saw a petrifying sight. The Amfleet coaches were right in front of her. She applied her brakes. But she was too late. Goodness me. This is a bad crash, said Treva. No one had been hurt or worse, but the ground shook. A few minutes later, the substitute train arrived to collect the passengers, and it carefully trundled away. When the wreck was cleaned up, the trains were being really useful on the Northeast Corridor for the hard work they do every day. Hey. The end.